see a few people coming in now. Welcome to this masterclass on legal apprenticeships. I'm delighted to be running this session for you, and I hope that you'll enjoy the masterclass and get involved by submitting your questions throughout. Just a few things before we start. First and foremost, please use the online question tool to post any questions that you have for any of our panelists. I'll be posing them at the end of the masterclass. Please also use the chat tool to let us know if you have any audio or visual problems during the masterclass, and we'll do our best to help you. Please also note that the masterclass is being recorded, and a recording of the session will be sent to all registrants after. It will also be available on our YouTube platform very shortly. Okay, I'm just going to start off by asking our attendees a few questions, just to get an idea of who's joining us today. Starting with a poll about stage. So what stage are you at? Are you a sixth form student, university, postgraduate, or in work? Obviously, from the apprenticeship background, you can join at many different stages, so I imagine there'll be quite a big mix. Well, I can see that we've got quite a lot of sixth form students here today, which is great to see. And I'm also going to run this poll, which asks, what would you like to find out about legal apprenticeships? Are you kind of interested in how apprenticeships differ from training contracts, maybe the structure of legal apprenticeships, the costs, or some advice for applications? Looks like it's quite a mix. We've got lots of people looking for some advice on applying to apprenticeships, and a few people looking at the other topics. So we're going to cover all of these things today. So hopefully you'll be a bit clearer by the end of the masterclass. Great, so now I'm going to get started. I'm just going to start by asking each of the panelists to just introduce themselves, starting with you, Theo, if that's okay.
Hi, I'm Theo. I'm a solicitor apprentice at CMS. I'm in my third year. I've done a year in banking, a year in commercial litigation, and I'm currently doing a year in pensions.
Amazing, thank you. And Amy?
Hi, I'm a solicitor apprentice at RPC. I joined in 2018, but I did a paralegal apprenticeship first. I'm currently in competition law.
Fantastic. And finally, Ruby.
Hi, I'm Ruby. I'm a first year legal apprentice at Burges Salmon in Bristol, and I'm currently sat in the real estate department at the moment.
Fantastic, thank you. Great, so I'm just going to start with a little bit of maybe an introduction to apprenticeships. I'm going to start with you, Amy. Could you tell us a bit about how long it takes to qualify into each route?
Yeah, so I think it can differ, but for the paralegal apprenticeship, I think it's 2 years. And then for the solicitor, for the one we're running, it's 6 years. I'm not entirely sure about graduate, but yeah, usually about 6 years.
And then just sticking with you on this one, as you've said, you started off by doing the paralegal apprenticeship. Roughly, what would be the difference between a paralegal apprenticeship and a solicitor apprenticeship, besides kind of the time scales?
Yeah, so obviously the studying is different. So for a paralegal apprenticeship, you get, I think it's either a level 3 or a level 4 qualification. And then for a solicitor apprenticeship, obviously you're doing a degree, and then you also do the qualification to become a solicitor. And like day to day, we found that it's just the work you're given, it just levels up a little bit. But yeah, they're the main differences.
Great, thank you. And now I'm just going to ask each of you to tell me quickly what kind of apprenticeships does your firm run? I'm going to start with you, Amy, since we're just talking to you.
Yeah, so we've actually just stopped our paralegal apprenticeship, which I did do, but we are now doing the solicitor apprenticeship. Yeah.
Great. And Ruby?
So my firm do an overall kind of legal apprenticeship, so it actually combines the two, the solicitor and the paralegal. Because technically I'm a paralegal apprentice at the moment, which is a 2-year apprenticeship, and then you can kind of bypass onto the solicitor apprenticeship. So overall it takes 6 years to qualify. So yeah, you have it's kind of 2 apprenticeships combined into one. But you could either finish it after 2 years and qualify as a paralegal, or complete the whole 6 years and you'll qualify as a solicitor.
Great, thank you. And finally, Theo.
So we offer a 6-year solicitor apprenticeship and a graduate apprenticeship, which lasts 3 years.
Great, thank you. And then just sticking with you on this one, Theo, about to kind of ask some clarification about the graduate apprenticeship. How would you say that kind of differs from the sort of traditional training contract model?
So the graduate apprenticeship lasts 3 years rather than 2. So just to go through them, a training contract, you'd typically be doing 2 years with 4 6-month seats in different teams. You'd be working full time. There's no studying during it. And when you apply, you'd be applying usually in 2nd or 3rd year of university. Lots of firms will offer a bursary for you to complete kind of post uni degree examinations. So the LPC or the SQE, but you'll have finished those before you start your training contract. For the graduate apprenticeship, you are doing the SQE at the same time as you're working. So it's 36 months and you get 1 day off a week to do your studying of the SQE. I don't know about every firm, but at least CMS only offer the graduate apprenticeship for people who've done a non-law degree. That might vary, I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, the main difference is the fact that graduate apprenticeships combines the study and the on-the-job learning.
Great, so kind of a nice way to sort of think about what your best learning style is as well. Definitely. And just sticking with you, Theo, why did you personally choose to do an apprenticeship?
So I had originally planned to go to university and I wasn't that interested in doing a law degree. But it was during COVID and I ended up giving up on that plan and taking a year out and working. And I think I realized how much I was enjoying the practical side of working, getting paid. And I essentially wanted to look at apprenticeships, did lots of Googling about legal apprenticeships because I started to develop more of an interest in law, found that they existed. And yeah, I think essentially just was excited by the idea of getting paid, having the practical experience, and also being quite busy. I think I wanted to keep working full time, but I didn't want to miss out on getting a degree. So the solicitor apprenticeship really appealed to me in that respect.
Great, thank you. And now just turning to Ruby, could you tell me a bit about what the benefits are of doing an apprenticeship?
The first thing I say for me is earn a competitive salary. I know it's obviously the given, but it's quite nice to, I've come straight from sixth form, and it's nice to feel like a bit of financial security as I'm getting paid to do university studies as well. And so with a qualified solicitor without student debt, that was quite a main thing for me too. Also, I technically get uni work at home, but I don't have to physically go into uni, so it's much more flexible for me. I think that's a really good benefit as well because I can do uni work sort of at home or like in work kind of it's more flexible sort of time. But we also get allocated 1 study day a week, which is really, really good and we also get paid as well to study. I like the idea of meeting clients as well, and every day is different. So if I did the traditional university route, I wouldn't be able to meet clients yet as I'm only just left school really. But it's really nice to be able to feel a little bit more professional and get paid, and you're kind of thrown into the legal world, but you're so well supported. I think, yeah, it's really good to get a good feel of what law is really. And also the good thing about working for a big company with your legal apprenticeship is you get the sort of perks, like you get private medical insurance at Burges Salmon, things that you wouldn't usually get when you're at uni. You get like company drinks and social, so it feels quite professional, but I think it's really good you're really well supported, and it's really good to give you a little bit of a heads up with actually the practical side of law, which I think is really good.
Thank you. And I imagine doing that sort of practical stuff can be quite good for supporting your studies. Obviously, like you can you're learning about stuff, but you're also kind of getting involved at the same time.
Definitely, I'm much more of a practical learner, so I think like getting ready to study something on a Monday is really good because I might be able to apply it and work on the Tuesday. So it's definitely good for practical learners because you see everything in action on real life cases, and yeah.
And then in terms of getting those qualifications, Ruby, what qualifications do you kind of get as an apprentice? Could you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so with the paralegal apprentice, after the 2 years, I'll get a level 3 paralegal qualification with a level 4 certificate in higher education in paralegal studies. So that is equivalent to the first year of university degree. And then after the 6 years, I'll get a degree in law, so like a normal LLB in law, plus the SQE which is 2 exams which everyone needs to take in order to qualify as solicitor, and all of that is funded by the firm. So that was another thing that really drew me towards an apprenticeship, because obviously all of that your employer pays for, which is nice.
Thank you. Right, now I'm going to move on to focus on the application process. Just a quick note, I can see a couple of questions have come through on the Q&A box. Please do keep sending those in. It's great to see a couple come through already. Great. Starting with you, Amy, here. Do candidates have to have studied A-level law to become an apprentice?
No, they do not. So I didn't. And some companies would say that it actually can give you bad habits, but you won't get penalised if you do. But it's just something to consider that it's not necessary.
Great, thank you. And then sort of when you're looking at sort of finding an apprentice, maybe is the next port of call if you've decided you want to do an apprenticeship. Theo, how did you find which firms were offering apprenticeships, and what kind of sites did you use? Is there anything you'd recommend looking at?
When I was looking, I probably did it in a slightly roundabout way, but I think I would say looking at directories, legal directories, which rank firms, like there's Legal 500 and Chambers. Both of those can kind of let you see what areas firms work in, which I think is a good way to just look at kind of first off, does a firm you're interested in offer the kind of work that you would want to do? And then you could go directly to their websites and see what they're offering. I think going to their sites is quite important because the courses might vary slightly. I think to streamline that slightly, and probably something I should have done but didn't do, is websites like lawcareers.net. I know that they have a legal apprenticeship board where they have lots of listed vacancies. So I imagine that will be quite helpful. But I think use that and still go directly to firms' websites, because I do think having a look at the exact course they offer is pretty important. I think there's Legal Cheek as well, which will give you some more information about what it's like to work at the firm from people who've worked there. There's kind of a grading system on the quality of the training, the work-life balance. There's also information about the average start and finish time, which can be useful to know kind of what you're committing yourself to. So if you combine all of those, I think you'll have a good idea of what firms you want to apply to.
Thank you. That's some really comprehensive advice. And yeah, definitely would take the opportunity to shout out the Law Careers Net's apprenticeship board. It's a good place to find those vacancies. And we also have an apprenticeship hub as well, which is a good place to get some advice about making those applications, which kind of brings me on to my next point. Amy, could you tell me a bit about the application process and maybe any advice you might have for prospective apprentices?
Yeah, so it is hard. There is a lot of stages. The way my firm works is you fill out some questions, then you do an assessment day, which involves a group task. You've got a interview and also a written task. I applied to quite a few apprenticeships, and I know they all differ, but they all are quite, you have to do interviews and a lot of questions. So it's quite hard. But I think the main bit of advice I would give is don't concentrate too much on like legal experience and stuff. I mean, you're going to be learning so much over the 6 years or 2 years or whatever you're doing, that you should probably come in and just think more about who you are as a person. So I think they really focus on having people that can actually come in from a young age into such big companies and be able to talk to people and be eager and learn and have something about them. So yeah, don't get bogged down in like what you know about law, because that doesn't matter as much as you think it might.
Great, thank you. And then in terms of doing that research for applications, Theo, I think we might have touched on this slightly in the last question, but do you have any kind of advice for researching firms?
I think as I said sort of in the previous answer, looking at the firm's website is probably the number one thing for me. If you know they offer an apprenticeship, look through their whole website. Really look at kind of what's their ethos when it comes to diversity, inclusion, those kind of things. If that interests you or you feel that's important to you, I think look at the teams and the areas they work in and what kind of work those teams do. And then I think you can build on that as well by looking at the LinkedIn profile for firms or for key people who work at the firm to see the kind of work they're doing, because they will post about it, obviously, if they can, if it's not confidential, but there will be posts about what they've been up to. I think a lot of firms publish knowledge updates as well, which will include information about what they're doing. So have a look at those and see if there's kind of work that might interest you that they're doing. I think, as I mentioned, Legal Cheek can be a really good one as well. Glassdoor has some reviews about what it's like to work somewhere, which are a bit more general, probably not as applicable to apprenticeship specifically, but that might be helpful as well. And as well, although I didn't do this, a lot of firms now are offering insight days or calls where they'll have apprentices from their firm speaking. So have a look on their websites and see if they offer anything like that, because that would obviously give you the kind of best knowledge possible.
Yeah, definitely, like attending those events and just getting those one-to-one kind of interactions and opinions is always good, which kind of brings me on to my next question. Ruby, would you be able to tell me about whether Burges Salmon runs any events for aspiring apprenticeships?
Yeah. So we run student information days. I think there's one in March. And I actually never attended this because I didn't know about it, but I wish I did when I was at sixth form. It's just a day where you come into the firm, you meet recruiters. So that's really positive as well, because if you are going to apply, you've already got some friendly faces that you can kind of mention in your application. It gives you a feel for the firm. You get a tour around. You get to meet not just apprentices, but also solicitors, people who have qualified through the apprenticeship route, which I think is also important, because when you're applying for an apprenticeship, you obviously want that end goal of qualifying. So that's really nice. So you can get a feel for the firm. You can, ask questions, do different activities, and then more towards actual application. So I think more in the autumn, we do an open evening, one virtual one and also an in-person one. And the in-person one's really good because loads of apprentices attend, and again, they're recruiters, so that's good. And also someone from the university, so you can ask all the questions, and then there's like a little PowerPoint presentation about kind of outlining the apprenticeship, which is really good. And then you also get a networking opportunity at the end, which is nice because you get to meet apprentices who work here and ask questions one-on-one, because you might not want to ask things in front of a whole crowd of people when there's a presentation. But if you can ask someone one-to-one, I think it's a much more relaxed atmosphere. So yeah, you've got the information days and also open evenings, which will give you a really good feel, especially if you're going to apply. I think it's just something to add to your application or CV or whatever, just to give you a little boost, show you're interested.
Great, thank you. Right, moving on to our next section, which is on finances. I think we've spoken about finances a bit already, because we've spoken about obviously the potential to earn while you learn. Theo, would you be able to tell me a bit about the costs of an apprenticeship and how that's covered by CMS?
So I think Ruby touched on this a bit earlier, but there really are no costs to you. So the firm will pay you, and that salary increases often throughout your course. And they pay for your degree and for any exams you do. So on the solicitor apprenticeship course, that's paying for your whole degree and then the SQE as well. So yeah, there's really no cost at all to you, which I think is one of the main benefits.
Amazing, thank you. And then Amy, how would you say that kind of affects access to the profession? How are apprenticeships improving that?
Yeah, so I think on the cost thing, obviously that opens it up to more people, being able to be paid whilst doing your degree, instead of having to pay so much, because obviously university is expensive if you go without doing an apprenticeship. And also it just means people from all walks of life apply. And it just opens it up to a bigger pool of people, I think, which I think is really beneficial. And there's actually a lot less focus on grades. I know that I don't think we have grade requirements anymore. So I think that's also great, because it's more about who you are as a person and what you can do day to day.
That's great, thank you. Fantastic. Now I'm going to focus a bit more on the sort of the actual apprenticeship, the day-to-day of what it's like to work as an apprentice. I'm going to start with you, Theo. Could you tell me a bit about how sort of different apprenticeships at CMS are structured?
So I'll start with the solicitor apprenticeship, since that's the one I'm on. I think, as we've covered, it's a 6-year course. At CMS, you spend 4 years doing year-long seats, and then you essentially join on with the trainee cohort, and you spend 2 years doing 6-month seats. Throughout the whole course, you're having 1 day a week to study. During the first kind of 5 and a bit years, that study involves studying kind of typical law degree modules, completing essays, exams, and also preparing a portfolio of work, which is all about meeting solicitor competencies. And this is submitted at the end of your degree rather than a dissertation. And then during the last portion of the apprenticeship, you're spending that 1 day a week studying the SQE. With the graduate solicitor apprenticeship that we offer, that is as I've mentioned, a 3-year course, and you're doing the SQE during that. So you get 1 day a week to study, much like with the solicitor apprenticeship, and you're working otherwise. And you're studying the SQE throughout those whole 3 years. In terms of seats, I think the typical structure at most firms is that you'll do your first seat as 1 year long in one team, and then for the next 2 years you'll do 4 6-month seats, much like trainees would.
Great. And then off the back of that, really, with the study days, how would you say that you've kind of found juggling work with study days?
I think it's definitely something that can be difficult if you let work build up too much. I think the main thing is just that you have to kind of get on with things as soon as they come up. So often I've found that once the reading comes in, just starting that as early as possible, and having my kind of calendar mapped out of when I'm going to have deadlines so I can start working on stuff with a reasonable amount of time to get that done. I think having the study day is hugely beneficial, but inevitably there is some spillover into your personal time. I think you can also find time sometimes during a work week. If you have a quieter period, you can maybe get a couple of hours done in an afternoon or in an evening. Really, it's just whatever works for you in terms of structuring it. I mean, that's one of the benefits I think Ruby mentioned. You have that flexibility, but that also means it's kind of entirely up to you to really manage that. And obviously you get support, but I think staying on top of it is just the absolute number one thing. At CMS, and I think at other firms, you can get extra time off around exams. So at the moment, I think I can have 2 days off prior to the exam, and then the day off as well, the day off the exam as well. And that's also quite useful if you need to kind of cram anything in last minute, or maybe you haven't quite found the balance that you're trying to most of the time.
Great, thank you. And then sort of moving on to look at the work days at the firm. Ruby, would you be able to tell me a bit about what a typical, I feel like this is always a bit of a tricky question, but what a typical day might look like? Obviously there's probably not like a set day, but kind of what you might get up to.
Yeah, of course. Well, every day is different, which I know sounds a bit cliche, but it genuinely is. But I usually, because I commute in, I get in quite early. That's not a requirement at all, but it's by choice. And I always make sure I do about an hour of uni work in the morning, which again is not required, but it just means that on my day, like my 1 day of study, I have a little bit less to do, which is really nice. But yeah, that's not required at all. That's just something that I choose to do. And then usually in the morning, I'll check my emails and I'll get on with the sort of tasks, either that I'm continuing doing or ones I've got assigned this morning. So the type of things I do, I might have to draft some documents, maybe do some billing, those sort of things. Like in the morning, I might have to do some legal research, which is really interesting because it's educating me, because I've never studied law before, like I didn't do it at A-level. So actually doing legal research for a solicitor is really beneficial. But yeah, usually just tasks like either billing or doing like some file management activities. And when I first started, it was a little bit of administration, but I think when you're joining, especially as a paralegal apprentice, it's important to kind of start from even just like filing stuff, because I got to understand the different types of documents. And yeah, now I'm doing a little bit more, like I said, like drafting documents. And then I'll have lunch with the other apprentices, which is really nice, really social. And then after, I'll either finish off the billing work or finish off some research, and then make sure to send it before the end of the day so that it's done. And yeah, I log off at 5 and I'm done. But usually tasks take me all day. But I think that's understandable because I'm still quite new. They don't expect you to be rushing and get into work and do 10 million things at once. Sometimes it will just be one task a day. Sometimes I'll have maybe 2 or 3, but yeah, it's really nice. It's not rushed and I can take my time and actually feel like I'm properly learning from everything that I'm doing, especially billing, because I think that's quite interesting because I can see how much the solicitors earn, which I'm quite nosy. So I quite like doing things like that, and it will benefit me in the future when I'm earning money from clients, if that makes sense. So yeah, that probably didn't help much because it was a variety of things, but just every day is different. But every task seems quite big, but is always manageable. And always never stay late, always make sure to log off at a good time. Yeah.
Great. That kind of brings me on to my next question. Amy, would you be able to tell me a bit about the work-life balance at the firm?
Yeah, so to be honest, I've always had a really good work-life balance. As Theo said, sometimes it spills into your personal time. Like sometimes in the week, I'll like to stay a bit, do a bit of uni work, but that genuinely tends to be just to reduce what I'm doing on my study day. But yeah, other than that, I mean, my weekends, I honestly don't think I've ever worked a weekend unless I've got an exam coming up. I've never done like uni work. So I've got a really good balance. I mean, and there's a lot of like in these firms, you know, there's a lot of drinks, a lot of events. If you're part of certain committees, you get involved in lots of things. I tend to go to London a lot as well, to our office in London. So yeah, it's really good. But yeah.
Great, thank you. And then just to turn that back to you, Ruby, could you tell me a bit about what Burges Salmon does to support apprentices' well-being?
Yeah, so to start off with, you get a buddy allocation, which is to older apprentices, which I think is really useful because we meet every week just for a coffee downstairs in the cafe. But it's really nice. It's quite an informal chat. Sometimes we chat about work, sometimes we don't. But the people team here recognise that it's really nice that they can support us, but also it's really important to have support from other apprentices who are your sort of age. You know, they've been through it, they're going through they're studying and they're working at the moment. So yeah, sometimes we'll talk about work, sometimes we won't. But I think it's so nice to just get to know people. So I feel really supported through the other apprentices. And also some of the recruiters are actually called our people team contact, which means that every week we again have a meeting. But this one's an optional online meeting. So it's good if you're working from home and we can kind of drop in and just ask them questions, or we can, you know, if we have a concern, go to them. We can go to them at any point ever really, but it's nice to have in my calendar, have an hour every week where I know, right, they're definitely going to be online, they're definitely dedicating this time to us. And I think that's really important because sometimes I might just have a silly question like, how do I log into this, which isn't a huge concern, but just knowing I can, oh, let me just hop on and ask, and they don't mind. That's really nice. I always feel like I have someone to talk to, which is really, really good. And also I have a supervisor in my department. This is obviously pretty standard for like people junior in law, but it's nice because I feel like I have quite a lot of contact with them. And again, we have regular meetings. These ones are every 2 weeks with my supervisor. But yeah, our work is monitored, but I think it's not monitored as in too much, but it's monitored as in like to give us more direction of what we need to be doing, which is really good, especially when you're starting out, because sometimes it's easy to think like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But when you speak to people, you never feel like that. And then also we have opportunities to get involved in an apprentice social committee, which isn't obviously a support system, but to me, I think it's been really good for support because we've gone out and done like apprentice socials. We went for a curry last week and gone for drinks, and just meeting in an informal setting outside of work is really nice because I feel like you get support from just speaking casually to people. So yeah, there's so many ways that you can get in contact with people and feel supported. And yeah, it doesn't feel forced meeting my buddies or meeting my supervisor like weekly or bi-weekly. It just feels really natural now, which is nice.
Great, that sounds really great. Thank you. Now just turning to you, Theo, would you be able to tell me a bit about your favourite thing about an apprenticeship, and maybe also what you would say the most challenging aspect is?
I think my favourite thing, I think what's most challenging, are kind of the same thing in the sense of, I think what you get out of the apprenticeship is very much what you put in. I think that you're really heavily involved in driving kind of how much experience you get, what work you get involved in. And that can be amazing because it can mean that you can really push to be involved in work that's quite, I suppose, quite complicated, quite high level, and that gives you sort of fantastic experience, especially when you're at a stage where there isn't too much expectation from you. So you don't really need to worry about making mistakes because people know you haven't necessarily got the background knowledge or experience. So you can just almost throw yourself in. I think the reason that can also be the most challenging part is that when you start, especially, I think there's a lot of you on the call are in sixth form, you probably, and I mean, I know I did, will feel like a child among adults in a sense, because everyone is sort of late 20s, early 30s, most of the qualified lawyers, and you'll be working with them. And I think I found when I first started, it was easy sometimes to look at a piece of work and think, I've been asked to do this, but I've noticed this extra thing or something I could add or something I could suggest. And especially at first, I think I would just say to myself, no, just do what they asked you to do and get it sent out. And then they'd come back with some feedback, and sometimes it would be the exact thing that I was thinking of doing. And I quickly realized that it really is just about throwing yourself in, getting involved. No one is going to turn around and be like, why are you making that suggestion? No one's going to really tell you that you've had a stupid idea, especially when you're just starting, because people acknowledge kind of how little experience you have. So yeah, I think the best part is that kind of self-driven learning and experience, but also that can be a challenge to begin with, but just throw yourself in if you do end up on one.
But yeah, taking that initiative definitely, seems like a good idea. And, it's always nice to get stuck into sort of more complex work and get learning extra stuff. Thank you. On that topic of maybe kind of more complex work, Amy, could you tell me a bit about whether apprentices have similar opportunities to trainees? How would you say that kind of compares from your experience?
Yeah, so when you're in your paralegal apprenticeship, and I don't know if it differs firm to firm, you do tend to do more low-level stuff. As Ruby was saying, there can be billing, there can be admin, but you also can very quickly open opportunities. So, I mean, from the outset, if you want to get yourself involved more and you create contacts, that people will trust you to do that. It's not like you'll be penalised or told you can't do things. As Theo was saying, if you throw yourself in, people actually quite like that and respond well. In terms of trainee work, I mean, I'm doing exactly the same work as all the trainees pretty much. And sometimes, to be honest, they even are coming to like us and asking us what to do because we've been here so long. But I find it's really equal. And I think people in our firm treat us sort of equal. So the opportunities we get are the same, which I think is really good. But as I say, if you throw yourself into situations, the opportunities will come from any stage. So yeah.
Great, thank you. And Ruby, would you be able to tell me a bit about the business development opportunities there are? Have you had a chance to get involved in much of that side of things?
Yeah, of course. So obviously, I'm only in my first year, so I haven't done loads yet. But I've seen some of the older apprentices, quite similar to trainees. They have opportunities to go on secondments, which I think sounds really interesting, and I'd love to do that. You have to be like in older years to do that, but that just basically means that you can take a few months in a different to work for a different institution. You're still obviously employed at your firm, but they'll kind of like hire you for say 4 months, and you can get to experience working for. Either some of them go to the different firm, maybe like a London firm or the Edinburgh firm, which I think sounds really interesting. Or you could go to maybe a different company. But I think that's a really good development opportunity that I would never have thought of when I was applying for apprenticeships. Before I worked here, I didn't even know that you could go into different sides of businesses, which I think is really interesting. Also, we have at the firm a kind of an online platform with all different learning resources, which I think is really useful because you're not forced to learn anything, but it's been really handy with my uni actually to learn about certain topics like, for example, money laundering, which is essential to know working in a big company, that I can just have a look online, look for this video, which is tailored to Burges Salmon specifically. So I feel like I'm learning things even though it's kind of in my own time, which is really nice. There's also opportunities for charity events. I know this might not be like business specifically, but this is more professional development opportunities. We get 2 paid volunteering days leave a year, which is nice because all the apprentices at my firm, we always do a volunteering day, which is really nice because I think if you can kind of have that bonding time together, but you're also doing good for the community, you're putting a good word out there for the firm, but you're also getting some experience for yourself, which is really nice. But yeah, I think you're constantly learning. So there's so many ways you won't even realize that you're just being developed as a person. But there's just so many things to get involved in, especially when, yeah, I think it's really good that they pay you to do volunteering because, yeah, it means that you can bond with everyone and have more experience, which is nice.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm gonna pause my questions now and just head to some of these audience questions because we've had quite a few that have come in. Someone's asked, someone from sixth form has said, what would you recommend that I do to make a compelling application? Does anyone have any kind of application advice, maybe specifically for apprenticeships?
I'm happy to start off. I think what I was saying earlier about looking at the firm's websites, I'd really recommend doing in terms of tailoring, if you're submitting multiple applications, tailoring each application really to that firm. I mean, they're all going to ask, or at least I found they all ask slightly different questions, but they're often along similar lines. But don't be too tempted to submit exactly the same answers, because really, if you dig in and look at kind of the ethos of the firm, the way they work, the work that they get involved in, yeah, you can make your application a bit more unique, and that'll stand out to people, I think.
Anyone else have anything to add on that? Or
Yeah, I think Theo mentioned earlier about looking on companies' LinkedIn, which is definitely a really good idea because that can help tailor your application more to the firm that you're applying for. So for example, when I was looking at Burges Salmon, I found some things that they did for a local football team and my family supported them. So I think that I built that connection to something that their firm did, which I was genuinely interested in, and I thought that had an impact on me. Obviously, there'll be different scenarios, but you look on websites like LinkedIn, look at the actual firm's websites. A lot of firms have values as well, and align yourself to those values. I'm sure even if it's not legal work experience, because before I worked here, I didn't have any legal work experience, but from transferable skills, I'm sure you'll be able to align yourself with the firm's values if they have values or certain work that they've done, certain clients they've worked with. Just find that personal connection, and that I think that should make you stand out, because obviously no one is going to be able to say the same thing as you because everyone's lived different experiences. But yeah.
thank you. And then in terms of those experiences and maybe skills, this is someone's kind of asked about extracurriculars, but I would say that could kind of be a broader question in the sense of what kind of experiences would you say are really good to highlight, be that kind of legal work experience, non-legal work experience, extracurriculars. Does anyone have any advice about kind of highlighting their experiences?
Yeah, I'll probably jump in on this. So I actually was speaking to the partner that interviewed me the other day about this, and he said the thing that he really liked about me was I did taekwondo, which was a hobby, and I ended up speaking about that and like doing that as a hobby. And he said he preferred that to a lot of the other stuff because I was showing those transferable skills and something that was so different from just the usual, going and doing work experience at a law firm or something. And I think those hobbies or like any sort of work, whether I did like waitressing, so many of those skills transferred over. And if you sit down and actually go through what you learn in these jobs and hobbies, you'll soon realize that you're ticking so many boxes. So like take the time to think about everything you do in your personal life, whether that be work or not. Because yeah, that can really make you stand out.
Fantastic, thank you. And someone else has asked, again, another sort of application kind of question, along the lines of commercial awareness. That's obviously something else you want to highlight. Do you guys have any advice for maybe highlighting that in your application, or even just building it when you're looking to make those applications?
I think, like I mentioned about the knowledge resources earlier that you can find on firms' websites, looking at those can be really, really good because they will be posting short, reasonably easy to understand articles about cases or developments in areas of law that are aimed at their clients or aimed at people who might be looking at the firm's website thinking about becoming a client of theirs. But equally, you can look at and you can get a kind of quick summary of something that's gone on recently. I think don't worry too much about the commercial awareness in your initial application unless there's some very specific kind of commercial awareness questions. I found that was only kind of coming into play during the final interview stages, in which case just preparing with kind of a recent case or a recent development in each sector that the firm works in could be really helpful, because if they ask a question about one of those sectors when you're answering, you can find a way to just drop that in, and that's just going to kind of twig to people that you've done some background reading and that you're kind of aware of what's going on in that area.
Great, thank you so much. And then also, kind of just moving on now to maybe some more questions about what the day-to-day of an apprenticeship looks like again. Someone's asked about practice areas? Obviously, I think a couple of you have mentioned which areas you're working in or which areas you've worked in, but what does the selection process look like for that at your different firms? Do you are you able to sort of suggest a preference, or is it kind of something that you're just allotted to?
In my firm, you can give your preferences. I know for your first year, you have the option between real estate or dispute resolution, just because they're the biggest departments in the firm, which I think is really beneficial when you're starting out, because there's other older apprentices in in those departments. There's so many different types of work to be getting involved in. There's sub teams within the teams. So you get two options when in my firm when you're in your first year, but then after that, you can choose any of the departments. And yeah, you rank which ones that you prefer to go to. So I haven't actually done it yet because I'm only in my first year, but I know that for September this year, I'll get to rank out of 10 where I'd prefer to go. And you can change it every year because obviously your interests might change and things like that. But I quite like that I don't just have to do a yes, no type thing. I can kind of be like, maybe this one's a 10, this one's about a 7. I quite like that idea. Obviously, I haven't done it yet, but I know from the older apprentices' feedback as well, it tends to work really well, because maybe if you don't necessarily get your first choice this time, they always bear that in mind on the system, and you're very likely to get it next time. And also with the ranking, they can sort of bear in mind that you're maybe a 7 interested in this, but then a 5 interested in a different department. So it's nice that you kind of get to rank. Also, because you're not really going to have loads of an idea of what the type of work is. You'll get a general gist, but I think until you're in that department, you're not going to fully know. So it's nice that you don't have to rule off everything and be like, no, or I guess you could put zeros for everything, but obviously the way that it works is you'd rank them for different numbers. I don't know how it works in other firms, but I think from what I've heard, it works well.
Yeah, zeros for everything probably wouldn't be the best idea, would it? But yeah, I think. And also, I think based off like what lots of lawyers and stuff I've spoken to, I'd say that lots of people kind of go, oh, I wasn't a big fan of this practice area before looking at it, but now I've got started on it. I'm actually really enjoying it, and I might even qualify into it. So you never really know, do you? But it was always nice to have that preference. I'm going to just ask one more audience question before I head back to my questions, which is someone's just asked sort of how common apprenticeship roles are, which maybe would be more like how many apprentices do you have at each of your firms? Is it quite a big team, or is there only a couple of you? Maybe starting with you, Theo.
I think there's a fair few now at CMS. The yearly intake varies depending on which officers are recruiting. So our recruitment is rotated between a stream that go into Bristol, a one north stream that's sort of Sheffield, Manchester, Liverpool, and you could be based across those offices or in kind of any one of those, and then also a London stream. So usually it's either one of the regional ones and London recruiting each year. In my cohort, I think there were about 10 of us that started, but that's increased year on year, I believe. And the other day I saw an email that was inviting all the apprentices at the firm to some kind of an event, and I think it was about 60 or 70 people that were in the email chain, and I was very surprised. But yeah, there are quite a lot, and as far as I know, lots of firms recruit for apprenticeships now, so there's lots of opportunities.
Thank you. Cool. I'm going to head back over to my questions now, and just kind of for some advice, maybe some closing thoughts. I'm going to start with you, Ruby. Is there anything that you would say that apprentices should know before they start their first day of work? Probably quite a good question for you, as you're just still in your first year, first impression.
Yeah, I would say get to know the other apprentices like right from the first day. Obviously, you're not if your firm does recruit multiple apprentices, which mine take 4 every year, you are gonna start off with those other people, which is really nice because I just come straight from sixth form, and some of them had as well. Some of them had taken a gap year, all different things, but we're roughly around the same sort of age, which was nice. But yeah, it's really good to get to know people straight from the beginning, especially because they're in the same position as you. And on my first day in department, then after we had a 2-week induction for my first day, which was nice because I wasn't actually thrown into legal work straight away. I expected to be put in on my first day, kind of sat down at a desk and just being like, oh, I don't have a clue what I'm doing. But it wasn't like that at all. We actually went through an induction, which was 2 weeks. We got a tour of the firm, we got training, introduction to the different departments. It was really nice, kind of an outline of everything. But on the first day, I would just say, just take the time to get to know the other apprentices, because it will work in your favour. You'll have friends to meet at lunch. And also, when I went into my department after the first 2 weeks, I didn't even know how to connect my laptop to the monitor because I'd never used one before. So it was quite useful that I did get to know everyone, because I felt really comfortable asking an apprentice. I'm sure anyone would have helped me, but just those like sort of questions that you think are silly. Obviously, there's no such thing as a silly question, but those questions that you think, or like no one else is going to be thinking this, the other apprentices will as well. So I'd say, yeah, on your first day, I doubt any firm would throw you into the deep end. So just take the time to get to know people's names, get to know people, and yeah, it'll be good for furthering down your apprenticeship.
Great, thank you. That's really great advice. And yeah, it definitely sounds nice to start as part of that intake as well. Turning to you, Amy, could you tell me if you have any advice for anyone who's considering this route into a profession?
Yeah, I think if you're considering doing an apprenticeship, then you should, as it's already been said, look into the firms you're applying for, because it might be that certain firms don't do the type of law that you think you might be interested in. It can also make a really big difference how big or small the firm is, I think, it's the types of work you get. That can go both ways. Sometimes at smaller firms, you're going to get better work. Sometimes you'd get worse work. It just depends. So look into the firms, look into their values, because you're going to be there for a long time. So you want to actually like the firm you're at and agree with, how they run and what they do. And yeah, as I keep saying, just, think about you as a person, whether you think you can balance that, whether you're happy to, give up your Monday to Friday. And yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. And Theo, one final question about any advice you might have, specifically if you have any advice for anyone who's maybe stuck between a law degree, the traditional training contract route, and a graduate apprenticeship, or maybe doing a solicitor apprenticeship.
So I think there are kind of several main points, mostly between the kind of degree option versus the apprenticeship option. I think the biggest thing to think about is that the social life is quite different. So there is loads of opportunities, I think, as the others have mentioned, to socialize with colleagues and work events and drink events, and they're really fun and you can have a really good time. And there's also networks you can join, such as kind of young professional things, to meet other people around your age, like who have similar jobs. But obviously, you're not going to meet quite as many people your age, because you'll be working with people who are at different stages in their life. So do really think about the fact that it will be quite different, and that for a lot of people, I think that uni experience is where they meet a lot of their lifelong friends. So just, I think, really consider that. I think another point to consider carefully is kind of your interest in the practical side versus academia. The law degree that I've been doing with the Uni of Law, I do get the opportunity to write lots of essays. And I think if you contact tutors about your essays, they're always happy to discuss things. But obviously it's less contact time than a traditional law degree would be. And you're probably spending a bit less time on the sort of philosophical side. So really think about what you kind of might prefer. Another point, I think, is that doing the apprenticeship is obviously not closing yourself into a route, because you could say it's giving yourself the security of a 6-year course and a job for the next 6 years and guaranteeing qualification, which is fantastic. But it does mean you're going to be qualifying as a solicitor. Do think about whether or not you want to keep your options open, do a law degree or do a non-law degree, and think about the graduate solicitor apprenticeships. Your route into law isn't going to be closed off if you decide to do a law degree, non-law degree. But obviously with the solicitor apprenticeship, like I mentioned, there is that security that you are kind of guaranteed to qualify. I think if I could just leave a final thought, it's just apply, especially if you're in sixth form. You can do your UCAS application. I would still do that, and also just apply to firms, because there isn't a set number you're allowed to do. So find firms you like the look of, find firms that you're interested in, apply to them, and you can make that decision when you get offers back. You don't need to know right now. You don't need to decide 100%. So yeah, just apply, I think. Go for it.
No, that's great advice. It's always good to you don't have anything to lose. It's nice to have a few options of what you want to do. Great, thank you so much. Right, just rounding off now. I just want to thank you all for taking part in this conversation, and also to the audience for joining us today. I hope you found the session informative and you're now feeling a bit more confident in your legal journey. It was great to have so many people from sixth form joining us today. I'm just going to be running one more poll to just find out a bit about your key takeaways from today. So that's launched now. So what is your key takeaway? Do you know more about the structure of different apprenticeships? Do you understand more about how they differ from training contracts? Do you feel more informed about the costs of an apprenticeship? And would you say you feel more confident crafting applications, or is there something else? Great, I'm just going to give people a few seconds to answer that. Cool. I think most people have answered that now. Great. Looks like we've got quite a lot of people who've said that they know more about the structure of different apprenticeships, which is great. It's good to know kind of when there's the different opportunities to come into those. And a few people feeling a lot more confident about crafting applications, which is great. It's good that we've been able to focus on that so much today. Fantastic. Great. So just before you go, just a reminder to attendees that we're going to be sending out a link containing the recorded session. So please do keep an eye out for that. You know, if anyone joined late or if anyone wants to go back to any of the things we discussed today, you're going to be able to watch that in the link. And also it's going to be available on YouTube very shortly. A survey is also going to be popping up after the masterclass has ended. So please fill that in to let us know how you enjoyed today, and maybe if there are any other topics you'd like to see us cover in the future. Also, if you're looking to find out a bit more about legal apprenticeships, please do check out our apprenticeship hub and also our apprenticeship board if you're looking to make applications. That's regularly updated each week. Great. Thanks once again to all our panelists and everyone attending today. We look forward to seeing you next time. Remember also, if you're interested in any of our future masterclasses, they can all be found on our events page. Great. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.